Welcome into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. I am your host, Jet Stryer. As always, I am joined by my co-host, John Sapichetti, and we are talking all things NBA today, as there is always so much to get to. How you doing today, Sap, before we get into it?
I'm doing just fine. Just fine.
Right down the middle. Nothing good, nothing bad, just fine. Very even keel.
Kind of like the Celtics, win some, lose some.
No, they're doing poorly, Sep. When you blow a 24-point lead, you're doing poorly, not fine.
Well, again,
their record
one,
says 500. Their
right.
enthusiasm for basketball says somewhere far below that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. They do not look good right now. They've got to right the ship.
Fortunately, on the docket today, we do not have to talk about the Celtics, as I'm going to give myself a little bit of a reprieve. If you want to see me talk about the Celtics, you can always go to my YouTube channel, as I do post games, every game, live reactions instantly. Most of them have been very negative recently. I apologize for nothing.
Why
I
should
don't feel
you?
like I should. I feel like they deserve it. So, you know what? We're going to get it. We're going to start with a team that's actually playing basketball hard and well. Perhaps the hottest team in the league right now, which should scare the hell out of everybody. The surging team in Brooklyn, the Nets. They are winners of 6 straight games, have a 20-12 record. Those 6 straight wins, 5 of them have been on the road, ending a West Coast trip a perfect 5-0. They have some quality wins over the Suns, Lakers, and Clippers in that stretch. Here's some numbers for you, Sap, of their big three. Kevin Durant's averaging 29 points, 7.3 rebounds, 5.3 assists. Kyrie Irving, a career high 27.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 5.7 assists. And James Harden, maybe the best of the three so far this season statistically, 25 points, 8.3 rebounds, and a whopping 11.4 assists. Is this team coming into their own? Is this the team to beat in the NBA now?
It's certainly the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. And what they did going out west and beating Phoenix after being down by 24 in a game which Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving did not play, then beating the Lakers without Kevin Durant, and then beating the Clippers without Kevin Durant, that's damn impressive. And the key there, too, Jed, is when these three players have been together, they seem to be working well together, and they're all efficient. These are three players that can get their own shot. They can create shots for other players. They can shoot from anywhere on the court and be effective. Deep threes, mid-range, going to the basket, getting to the free throw line, hitting free throws. I mean, these are three elite scorers, elite offensive players, and it's worked really well so far. Still questions about their defense. In a game against the Lakers, I believe Joe Harris was 6 of 7 from 3. Is that something that's sustainable? No, although he's an outstanding three-point shooter. You don't expect someone to shoot 83% from three-point land in a given game. And they were able to beat the Lakers handily because they were so efficient from 3. So, yeah, they're the best team in the Eastern Conference. I felt that once the trade was made. In fact, I felt that going into the season. You put Durant, Kyrie Irving with the nice pieces they had. I thought they were the best team going in, and James Harden is fit seamlessly with them. They're going to be tough to deal with. And among all those numbers, too, Jet, 12-4 against teams with 500 or better records. So they've beaten pretty much every elite team in the league, and oftentimes on the road. They are scary.
Yeah, their defense is a question mark, but it's improving. Let's look at this 6-game win streak, Sap, in terms of the points they've allowed. 94 to Indiana, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. 117 to Golden State. Golden State's a high-scoring team. That's not great, but 117 is kind of understandable with Golden State. 125 in a win over Sacramento. That's not great defense. 124 in a win over Phoenix. Not great defense. But then against the Lakers, held them to 98 points and held the Clippers to 108. I mean, that does 108 seems like a lot, but for a really good offensive team like the Clippers, the defense is getting better, in my opinion. And listen, because Harden's never going to be active on the defensive side of the ball. Kevin Durant's been out, and he's more of a team defender than a one-on-one defender. Kyrie Irving is at best apathetic about defense. They're never going to be a team that's going to be holding teams in the 80s and 90s consistently. That's just not how they're built. That's not those guys' mentality. All three of those guys, first and foremost, are scorers. That's their primary mindset is scoring and playmaking on the offensive side. So the defense is never going to be at a point where, you're talking about a 2004 Detroit Pistons level defense or a 2008 Celtics defense. That's not what they're going to be. But I think it can be, and you're seeing that it can be certainly good enough to be able to win a championship. And that's really all they need, because they're never going to have a problem scoring the basketball. I mean, if you look at their numbers, the last time they were held under 100 points was January 25th against Miami in a game they won, and they had 98 points. So this is a team that's going to consistently be scoring in the high 100s. I mean, looking at the win streaks app here, their scoring totals: 112, 109, 128, 136, 134, 104. They're scoring a boatload of points. So even when your defense isn't top notch, if you're putting up points in the 130s, it is really difficult to beat you. I mean, if you're putting up 134, then the team that's got to beat you has to score 140 points. I mean, that's a lot of points to put up in a 48-minute basketball game.
And they're very efficient, right? The three great players are all shooting right around 50%, 40% from three. They're an outstanding three-point shooting team, not just Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, but also Joe Harris has been really good. TLC had a huge game against the Lakers. I mean, everything fell into place that night against the Lakers, who are having troubles right now without Anthony Davis. They're not able to hit three-pointers at a high level, and that's why Brooklyn won that game handily. The thing about the Brooklyn Nets that is really, really scary is how efficient these three players are, especially Kevin Durant. We've always agreed that he's probably the most efficient, most versatile scorer we've ever seen. I've been watching basketball for a long time. I can't think of another player who had more ways to score than the way Kevin Durant can do it. Now, Michael Jordan was a better scorer, and, Shaq in his prime was unstoppable. I get all that. And Kareem Skyhook's still the most indefensible shot in the history of the sport. But in terms of once he crosses midcourt, Kevin Durant can score from anywhere on the court by any means possible. We know what Kyrie Irving can do when he's dialed in. And James Harden is one of the most unique players who, oh, by the way, is leading the league in assists. So that is scary to deal with. The other two players on the court at a given time can spot up and get some wide open threes. They're going to be a tough team to deal with. We're going to have to see how they go up against a Milwaukee with Giannis, although Milwaukee seems like they're going through the motions this year. But I really want to see how they are against Philadelphia with Embiid, how they're going to deal with a big man. And then if the finals is what I think it's going to be, Nets, Lakers, a healthy Anthony Davis, that's a different team than they'll be facing than they faced last week in L.A.
Yeah, I think the only way that you can beat this Nets team that I see is to kind of revert back to 1990s basketball and beat them up physically and beat them down low in the paint. They don't have really any defense in the paint. DeAndre Jordan isn't the same player he was. He's still a very capable player playing 20 minutes a night, but he's not going to lock down somebody down low, especially like a Joel Embiid or Giannis. So that's the way that you can punish the Nets if you want to. You have to kind of say, we can't get into a shooting contest with this team. You won't win it. If it's just going to be an outright shootout, you're not beating them. Nobody's beating them. Nobody has that kind of offensive firepower. It's the closest thing in terms of offensive firepower to the Warriors team that we saw the past couple of years before they broke up and all the injuries. So you're not winning a shootout against this team. So what do? You kind of have to play bully ball and make them work defensively and beat them up down low and get easy baskets in the paint. That being said, not a lot of teams have guys that are capable of doing that. So Philadelphia, I think, and as you mentioned, Milwaukee might present difficult matchup problems for them. But this Nets team offensively is a matchup nightmare for anybody. Nobody can defend three guys who can on a given night give you 40. It's just not doable. So they're going to be a very, very difficult out. And it doesn't matter what team they play. It doesn't matter, if they're playing a team with a great center, they're still going to put up points. No matter what. So you have to make them work defensively if you want any chance of it. But I think this West Coast road trip was a real test for them, Sap, and they passed it with flying colors. I mean, you couldn't ask more. They went undefeated on this West Coast road swing. That's a difficult trip against three teams in Phoenix and the two LA teams that are legitimately competing in the Western Conference to be in the Western Conference. Any of those three teams, I don't think anybody would be surprised to see any of them in the Western Conference Finals potentially. So it was really an eye-opening West Coast trip for this Nets team. And you know what? The schedule actually eases up for them here coming forward. The next 3 games are all at home against Sacramento, Orlando, and Dallas. All of those teams are struggling right now. And then they play the Spurs and the Rockets on the road in Texas before the All-Star break. And we don't know what the schedule is going to be after that. The NBA hasn't released it. They will soon. So it's not like it's going to really get tougher for the Nets right now. They should just continue to win. I know they have 6 right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to rip off a big win streak here.
Yeah, they're going to be very, very difficult to deal with. And this is all taking place with Kevin Durant out. He's dealt with some COVID concerns, but also the groin. So they can take their time with Kevin Durant coming back, who's missed 13 games this year. Kyrie went AWOL for a period of time. He missed 10 games. So they're doing some sort of load management by hook or by crook. And then you've got Harden, who's kind of made it work together. I can't see anybody in the East beating them. And I really think the Clippers and the Lakers are probably the only 2 teams that can beat them out West.
Yeah, it does seem that, and yet they both beat both teams. I know Anthony Davis wasn't there, and the Lakers couldn't hit 3, but again, they have so much offense that what's Anthony Davis, as great of a defensive player as he is, and as great as a defensive player LeBron James is when you want him to be. Well, then you still got that. Say they cancel out those two guys cancel out. Well, then you have a third guy on the Nets who can put up 40 when he wants to. That's why they're going to be so difficult to beat. Is that no team has 3 options that can put up that many points. I think the Celtics were hoping to with Kemba Walker, but when you go 1 of 12 from 3 consistently, that's not a legitimate third option.
Not in the same league. I mean, I know Tatum and Brown are outstanding young players.
I just am telling you that's what they wanted to happen, Seth, not what actually happened.
And I want to date Scarlett Johansson too, and that ain't happening.
Well, the Lakers wanted Kyle Kuzma to be a legitimate third option. He's not either.
That's not happening either. Nope.
So, let's go from the hottest team in the league in the Nets to what's probably the absolute drag of the league and the Minnesota Timberwolves, because I just want a juxtaposition. It's a good juxtaposition of what's going on here. The Timberwolves have decided to cut ties with their head coach, Ryan Saunders, son of Flip Saunders. He's been canned. The Wolves were 7-24 on the season. Saunders, in his unillustrious career, finishes 43-94 as the head coach of the Timberwolves. They have done the rare move of actually not doing an interim head coach. They just outright hired a head coach to replace Saunders. Chris Finch, the assistant from the Toronto Raptors. He was an assistant with the Rockets, Nuggets, and the Pelicans before this year. And he is a 51-year-old from Franklin and Marshall University, a basketball powerhouse, as everybody who follows college basketball knows. Franklin and Marshall, just multiple national championships. Obviously, it's not surprising to have a coach be fired when your record's that bad. But are you surprised that, 1, they hired a coach instead of naming an intern head coach in the middle of the season? And 2, there's been a lot of pushback on social media from players and some media, too, that, here we go again. They just hired another white guy without giving a black guy a chance. What do you make of this whole story, Sap, in its entirety?
Normally, the process is to just name an interim head coach, right? We're about halfway through the season.
It's extremely rare to just hire a new head coach in the middle of the season.
Hire a new coach and then go outside the organization. Now, again, if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, it probably makes sense to go outside the organization because they haven't really contended in decades. Pretty much since Kevin Garnett left. I mean, they did make the playoffs one year with Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy Butler, and Andrew Wiggins. Yeah, they just weren't really a factor. So you go outside the organization. You go to Toronto, which is always a good place to go. Toronto, Nick Nurse is starting to remind me a little bit of Sean McVay. If you've coached for Nick Nurse, you're probably going to become a head coach at some point in the NBA, or if you've been in the front office.
The Pacers hired one of his assistants too.
That's what Toronto does. And look, I think Masai Ujiri, who is the president of the Toronto Raptors, is the best executive, maybe in all of sports. To win an NBA title in Toronto is pretty amazing. And then to see how they got off to a really slow start this year, and they've turned it around, and they're playing their home games in Tampa, and they've still been a viable team. I think they run that organization in the highest of
look, they find good value. That's what it is. Look at Fred VanVleet, undrafted. Chris Boucher is somebody who's in the G League, and they just plucked him, and he's playing a big role in that team. I mean, he's really good at scouting talent in finding those diamonds in the rough. That's what it comes down to with these small market teams. You have to find guys.
They have to.
Because guys aren't signing there.
Well, he was the 27th pick in
Yeah.
the first round, Pascal Siakam, and he's an all-star. No free agents are going to Toronto. I mean, they were able to trade for 1 year of Kawhi Leonard, led to a championship. Free agents aren't going to Minnesota either.
Right.
And
So it's about
Minnesota's a
signing
weird
and developing. That's what the
developing,
coaching staff comes into play.
and Minnesota's had 3 number 1 picks the last 6 or 7 years, right? They had Andrew Wiggins in 2014. They had Karl Anthony Towns in 2015. And just last year, Anthony Edwards was the number 1 pick. And they still haven't been able to put it all together because not all number 1 picks are created equal. I mean, I'll go back to Tim Duncan was the number 1 pick in 1997, one of the 10 greatest players in the history of the sport. The following year, the LA Clippers had the number 1 pick in the draft. They ended up with Michael Olowokandi, certainly not one of the 10 greatest players in the history of the sport. So,
but one of the 10 greatest players from the University of the Pacific, Sap.
That's true. Absolutely. That goes without saying. But you have to get lucky sometimes and get that first pick when Shaquille O'Neal comes out or when LeBron James comes out, players of these.
I thought that was
caliber.
Karl Anthony Towns.
I did too. I don't know what's missing with him now. I'm going to hold back from criticizing Karl Anthony Towns because he has had a horrific 2 years. He lost his mom last year because of COVID. I believe he's lost 6 or 7 family members because of COVID. He had COVID. So I'm going to hold back on Karl Anthony Towns. I don't consider him a force multiplier. He's a guy that goes out there and puts up numbers.
Numbers are incredible. The numbers are incredible. And watching him play is incredible. I mean, he's got a very similar game to Anthony Davis.
You know who also wasn't a force multiplier? Anthony Davis. I mean, all those years in New Orleans,
the winning's not there.
The winning's not there. I mean, there's not a lot of force multipliers in the league.
There were like 2 years or 3 years in a row where at the beginning of the league, the GMs do their survey and they say, who would you start a franchise with? You have your pick of everybody in the league. And Karl Anthony Towns was the number 1 guy for about 2 or 3 years in a row, ahead of LeBron.
Right. Yeah, because of the age difference. So then you move on from Andrew Wiggins, you trade him to Golden State. Anthony Edwards, he had a great dunk over the weekend.
Yes.
Is he going to be an all-star caliber player? I don't know. If they're fortunate to get the number 1 pick next year, Cade Cunningham, the point guard from Oklahoma State, looks like a can't-miss prospect. He's 6'8", can kind of do it all. And at that point, that becomes kind of a pretty good job to get, right? Because
but at some point, Sap, I mean, they've been in the lottery the past 20 years.
Pretty much, yeah. And they just can't seem to get it right.
Or at least since Kevin Garnett left. So not quite 20, but over 10.
Well, like I said, in 14, 15, and 20, they had the number 1 pick in the draft. Andrew Wiggins, he was the consensus number 1 player when he came out of Kansas, and was extremely hyped. Extremely hyped. I mean that was considered an excellent draft class at the time. Right. That was the draft class we all looked forward to because it looked like the Celtics were tanking. They ended up with Marcus Smart 6th. The best player in that draft, obviously, is Joel Embiid. He was number 3. He was Wiggins' teammate at Kansas, but he had some injury concerns, and it took him a few years to get up to speed. So they took Wiggins, which I think most teams would have. They took Karl Anthony Towns, which every team would have. And this past draft, it looks to me like LaMelo Ball may turn out to be the best player out of the 2020 draft class, which is kind of a surprise to me. So if they can get another pick and it's Cade Cunningham, maybe they'll have all the pieces in place. But to get back to your earlier point, why not just elevate one of your assistant coaches, finish the season off, and then hire your coach permanently going forward? I mean, Chris Finch, is he this much of a coaching guru that, he had to get hired right now? And if you're Toronto, I mean, in the NFL, you wouldn't go pluck the offensive coordinator out of a team midseason and name him as your head coach. It doesn't work that way.
They didn't have to let him do. They didn't have to let the Timberwolves do that. They could have blocked it if they wanted to. But I guess that's a good culture thing. People want to be assistant coaches there. But the circumstances are strange. And like I said to you, Sap, and we're going to get your take on this in just a second. A lot of players are upset that the associate head coach of the Timberwolves is this guy named David Venterpool. He before working for the Timberwolves, he was the assistant coach for the Portland Trailblazers, who've been a very successful franchise.
Good team.
No titles, but they've been right in the mix in the West. They've been blocked by Golden State and now the Lakers, but they've been very good. Went to Western Conference Finals. A lot of people, especially guys in the NBA who played under him, specifically Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, are saying it's ridiculous that they didn't at least give him a shot for half of a season to see what he could do. As opposed to, it doesn't look like there was an exhaustive search. They fired the guy and hired somebody else the same day. Yeah,
that's odd, isn't it? Like they had their eye on Chris Finch from afar. And like I said, Nick Nurse is starting to feel like Sean McVay. It's like, let's go get an assistant coach under Nick Nurse.
I mean, he
because
may
he's going to
very
be good.
well be an excellent coach, but would he not have been available in the offseason?
Right, and then you see
And
what you have.
So far out of it, Sap. It's not like if he coaches
No.
really well, they're not climbing back into the playoff race.
They have the worst record in basketball. They're 7-24. They're like 4 games behind the Cavaliers, who've lost 10 in a row. That's how bad Minnesota is. I mean, they're the worst team in basketball. So just elevate your assistant coach, play out the season. I'd tank at that point.
Is it a fair gripe, though, the race part
Absolutely.
of it? Is that a fair gripe?
Absolutely.
David Vanderpool, if I didn't mention, is black. Chris
Right.
Finch is white.
White.
Do you see that as a problem in the We know it's a problem in the NFL. It's a massive problem in the NFL.
It's a massive problem in the NFL. And I laugh at when now all of a sudden Robert Saleh is considered a minority. You know, the Jets hired him
they'll
from
count
San
whatever.
Francisco.
If you're 1/18th Cherokee, they'll consider it a minority in the NFL now.
He's Muslim. That's a religion. That's a choice, right? You can become. I can become a Muslim. Would that make me a minority? He's of Lebanese descent. That I've never thought of someone who was of Lebanese descent as being a minority. But the NFL says, "Oh no, he's a minority," so we filled the quota with Robert Saleh. It's a huge problem in the NFL. Not as much in the NBA, but I can see the players being upset about this. Like, why are you not just elevating a coach who seems to have a lot of players that played for him on his side and pushing for him to get this job? Give him a chance.
Sap,
I don't get it.
Would it surprise you if I were to say there are currently 5 black head coaches in the NBA? Sorry, 4.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty amazing,
4.
right? So out of 30.
Doc Rivers, Dwayne Casey, Monty Williams, and Lloyd Pierce. And I guess JB Bickerstaff. Is he still coaching in Cleveland? Yeah, that's 5.
What about Ty Lue?
Oh yeah, this list was crap.
Yeah, that's an old list. Yeah. Yeah,
so Ty Lue, that's 6. I'm trying to think of anybody else. And I know when the Nets hired Steve Nash this offseason,
right, that was a concern. Yeah,
same concern too. No experience. Granted, he played in the NBA, won 2 MVPs, but is a white guy who's never been even an assistant coach before.
Right,
so is it a
coached.
problem in the NBA considering the league is what 80 some odd percent black,
80%,
higher than that?
80% black, sure, and also.
And of the 30 teams, let's say 6 coaches are black off the top of my head.
Yeah, so that's 20%. And you also have a league that's generally been progressive, right? I mean, it's the only major sport that has a minority owner. I mean, I know Shad Khan's considered a minority. He owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. Michael Jordan owns Charlotte, so he's the one minority owner in the 4 major sports. It should be higher than that. And it doesn't seem like the black coaches get second and third chances where the white coaches do get second and third chances. And I'm not including Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers won a title. You know, I think as soon as Doc Rivers was let go by the Clippers, anybody would want to hire Doc Rivers. He's an accomplished coach, right? So there's all different types of backgrounds to every coach. So
I'm not a huge fan of his. I don't think he's a great coach or a particularly great announcer. But in fairness, Mark Jackson did a pretty good job with Golden State. Hasn't gotten a job offer since.
I know. He set the groundwork for that team. You know, people forget
so
the year before they won the titles.
Despite what you think of his personality, he's got some weird religious stuff going on where he does. And some inappropriate stuff with some assistants. Whatever you think of that, he wasn't Ryan Saunders, Sap, who was 7-24 this season and 42-90, whatever he was.
And
he is yet to get another head coaching job.
And Ryan Saunders obviously was a nepotism hire, right? I mean, Flip Saunders' dad, who passed away 5 years ago, but there was that connection with the Timberwolves.
And then there's guys who have been longtime assistants, like this David Vanderpool guy. Sam Cassell is a guy who played in the league for a while, won a couple championships as a player, has been on Doc Rivers' coaching staff for years. I think a lot of players look at that and go, why isn't Sam Cassell getting a shot? So is this a significant problem in the NBA?
Yeah, it is. It certainly is because the players are talking about it. And they talked about it last season, right? I mean, Kyrie Irving was talking about it back during the bubble. There was a concern over what was going on within the league. And Kyrie, I know everybody likes to make fun of him, but I think his heart's in the right place. And sometimes he doesn't necessarily articulate what he's trying to get at, but I think he's getting his point across. Yeah, no, it's a massive problem. It also, you don't see a lot of big guys that get brought in as coach. I mean, people used to ask Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like who's arguably one of, 3 or 4 greatest players in the history of the sport. Not arguably, I think he is one of the 3 or 4 greatest players in the history of the sport. And it's like, why wouldn't you reach out to someone like that to be a head coach? Patrick Ewing was interested
Robert
in
Parrish
coaching
tried to break
in the
in for a
NBA.
long time. Never
Dennis
got
Johnson, was an assistant coach. That was about the highest level that he
Patrick
got
Ewing
to.
was working as an assistant for years and years before he got the
Right.
Georgetown job and never
Yeah.
sniffed an NBA job.
No, there is some sort of still a stigma, and it's unfortunate. And I think Stephen A. Smith touched on it, that Steve Nash got that Brooklyn job because that was a plum job, right? You're going to go in and coach Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and then a month later you get James Harden. That's like
that was the top job this offseason,
without question. That and the Philadelphia job where Doc went to, because you get Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons and a talented roster. Those were 2 good places to go. It's still a concern because you're getting these no-name assistants kind of jumping ahead of other coaches who've put their time in.
Especially, I look at it as it's coaches that have put their time in, but also guys who are players and then put their time in as coaching.
Yeah.
I feel like that's 2 pretty good intangibles to have. Like, I think Sam Cassell, could end up being a really good coach. I've heard good things about Ime Udoka, who's been in the San Antonio system for a while. I don't know what team he's coaching with now, but he hasn't gotten a head coaching opportunity yet. He's gotten a lot of interviews, but hasn't been hired. I look at it as more of a problem set because, as I mentioned, that the league is so black in terms of the diversity of it. So why shouldn't coaching? I'm not saying it has to be 80%, but it should certainly be a lot closer to 50-50 than what it is.
Not 20%. And then guys, there's a short shelf life for coaches. Doesn't work out, they get moved out and they don't get another chance. One coach who won a national championship at Connecticut, who I always thought would make a great NBA coach, is Kevin Ollie, who played in the league forever, played on like a dozen teams.
He ended it on bad terms.
There was some sort of issue going on there with Kevin Ollie because Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, when they were all young pups at Oklahoma City, Kevin Ollie was playing there, and they loved him. He was like
everybody
their
said he was going to be head coach in the NBA. He was on top of all those lists. It's like how everybody says Rondo is going to be a head coach.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like this is a no-brainer. He's just going to walk in, be a great head coach. And again, he was a point guard on a national championship team, won a national championship as a coach, had the connection to the NBA, played for a dozen years or more. And again, when you got Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook waxing poetic about you would think you'd just walk into the job. I thought Kevin Ollie was going to be hired by the Nets if Kevin Durant, wanted to have him as the head coach. I don't know, there may be something we don't know about Kevin Ollie, but it is a major concern without question. Sometimes you get these assistant coaches that now we've got Evan Turner's an assistant coach with the Celtics, and he's only 32 years old. I think they brought him in to try to connect to the young players because Brad Stevens has had some can't relate to the young players. He's more of a X and O guy that doesn't know how to maybe understand or reach the young players. So you have that where you bring in that veteran player who segues into coaching.
But at some point you got to convert it from you having them as the token assistant guy to actually giving them some serious responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, give it a chance. I mean,
what could Minnesota? I mean, and they're not the only team that does this. They're just the most recent team that done it. What could they possibly know about Chris Finch that was so intriguing that they had to hire him right away, as opposed to giving this David Venterpool a chance?
Yeah, other than the Nick Nurse connection.
Or what do they know about David Venterpool that turned them off so much?
Right, because he hasn't been there that long. And again, he was in Portland, and Portland seems to be a well-run organization.
Those guys love him. I was reading what McCollum and Lillard were saying about him. They had great things to say about him.
Yeah,
so
I don't get it.
It's a problem. Is there anything that the league can do about it? Do they have to do a sort of a Rooney rule like the NFL? It hasn't worked in the NFL.
Which the NFL doesn't even adhere to anymore. It doesn't even appear that the NFL's adhering to the Rooney rule.
So other than a polite nudging from Adam Silver, doesn't seem like there's a whole lot that can be done. Because at the end of the day, it's the owner making the decision, not the players.
And does Michael Jordan, as the only black owner, the next time he brings in a new head coach, have to hire a black head coach just to, it was like the Rooney rule came about, and the first opportunity that Pittsburgh had, they hired Mike Tomlin, an African-American coach. They put their money where their mouth was. Maybe Michael Jordan, as the one African American owner, has to do that.
Well, he is a foreign-born coach. That's good. Resuming from just a quick technical difficulties, continuing to talk about this weird coaching hire in Minnesota, and I don't want to continue to harp on it because it's Timberwolves and they suck, and ultimately, whoever they hire it seems doomed to fail, regardless of who they hire. So maybe David Venterpool dodged a bullet by having to coach this team. But like you said, Sap, it's not like they're in terrible position. They have talent, and they have probably what's going to be a top 3 pick this year. So I do think the calls from the players are going to get louder for more diversity amongst head coaches. Whether the NBA or the owners do anything about it your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I think they'll address this because they're pretty proactive, the NBA. And it's not like there's not a really good pool of qualified coaches. There are guys that have had success, but don't get a second or third chance, and that's unfortunate.
So the NBA has problems here, obviously, as does every professional league. There's just not a lot of diversity in coaching. A problem that is going to be complicated for the NBA to fix. One, I think another problem the NBA has that is much easier to fix, and I have a solution for them, Sap. We saw this on the national TV game yesterday, Celtics-Pelicans. The replay is a mess in the NBA. It's an absolute mess. It screws up the game. It's nobody likes it. Coaches, players, the referees don't. Maybe they like it. They get a little more screen time, but it's a mess right now. I don't want to hear complaints, Sap. I want to hear solutions. What do you have? How can the NBA fix this? I have some great ideas, but let's start with your ideas. You're an idea man, Sap. Let's hear what you got.
I think you have to limit replay to a few things. Now, when you've got two hands on the ball goes out of bounds, and we're slowing the video down to the point to see which fingernail it went off last, it's just exhausting. The last 3 or 4 minutes in regulation and the overtime period between the Celtics and Pelicans took about 45 minutes, and I'm not being hyperbolic. The game just dragged on forever.
Game started at 3:30. It ended around 6:45, it seemed like.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, because they were getting ready to go to the pregame show for the Clippers and Nets, which started at 8. It almost felt like the NFL where they overlap sometimes.
Yeah.
And this was a much, bigger portion for this. I would probably get rid of it to the point because they just can't seem to get this right. The only thing they could do is if there's any sort of situations where, Jaylen Brown's hand is going one way and the Pelican hand is going another way, and they decide to divvy it up, maybe just have a jump ball at that point. That might be a solution.
Here's the problem, though, Steph. It's not in the spirit. The replay as now is constituted, especially with the out of bounds. It's not really in the spirit of the game. Looking at the minutia to see, if a guy got his fingernail on it. If the guy swipes the ball and it goes out of bounds, but happens to hit the fingernail of another player, the ball should be out of bounds off the guy who swiped at the ball.
Who causes the ball to go
Who causes
up.
It, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
That's the spirit of that's how the game is supposed to be played. And then we get into all this, like you said, minutia, and we're getting microscopic evidence that it's so unnecessary. So here's my quick fix, Sap. And we talked about this before the show. You're totally right that it kills momentum. It kills fan interest in the game.
Oh, yeah.
It kills the player interest in the game. And I think if you're going to keep it, I thought they should got rid of the challenge in general because it sucks. The coaches don't seem to know how to use them. I would get rid of that first and foremost. But if you're going to keep any sort of replay, here's how I fix it. 45-second time limit, period. If you can't figure it out in 45 seconds, the call in the court stands. You agree. Seriously, 45 and you're done. That is the absolute max amount of time I want to see them doing this. Some of these take 5 minutes. It's insanity. Yep. So you have a clock on it, and if you can't figure, I think that's a fair enough time to say if you can't figure it out within 45 minutes, then you're not going to figure it out, and just go with your call.
45 seconds.
The NFL, by the way, should do the same. Sorry, 45 seconds. It does seem like 45 minutes.
It does.
The NFL should do the same thing. Here's how else I'd work it. The replay center, just radio to the ref and say, yep, it was this, it was that. I don't need the refs going to the monitor and doing all this and working hand in hand with the replay center. You have a dedicated replay center with people who are looking at every play. Just tell the refs what it is definitively, one way or the other. Don't involve the refs. You don't need 8 people It's like, I mean, it's seriously. Why is there bureaucracy going on to overturn an out of bounds call or a charge? You don't
Yeah, and
need eight. You don't need 8 people standing around. 6 of them are in New Jersey. 2 of them are in Atlanta to figure out what the hell is going on. So
Stan Van Gundy, Stan Van Gundy looking like Ron Jeremy on the sideline,
right?
Putting his mask on and off. No, do like the NHL
45
does.
seconds. Here's what it is.
That's what the NHL does. The NHL does that. Now they get a little too much with, was the guy skate off the ground and that makes him offside. In baseball, you have, the player slides to second base as he's coming up. He gets off the bag by, a half an inch and gets tagged. He's called out. That's just not good. That's just picayune, and it really slows down the game. You're right. The spirit should be one thing, and you carry it that way. Let's not.
But I'm serious on the time limit. They need to put a time limit on it. It's
Great
crazy.
Idea.
Because seriously, if it's not obvious enough that you can't figure it out that quickly, and sometimes the people, a lot of the times, us on TV are figuring out much faster than the refs. That shouldn't happen. It should never happen. That makes no sense. So time limit on it. I want it all handled with the replay center. Take the referees out of it. And my last point is make the replay center as independent as possible. I don't want to see all these ex-referees working in the replay center because then they're just going to – the call will just always agree with the refs. Have them be independent. Have them not know who the refs are. Have them be blindfolded and muted if they have to be. I don't want them at the refs' kids' birthday parties. I don't want them to be former colleagues. Completely independent. The biggest thing there to me, though, is the time limit. These things – have gone on way too long. A 5-minute replay is absolute insanity.
It's ridiculous.
You might as well cancel the game at that point.
Yeah, we saw that Sunday with the Pelicans and Celtics. It was just like one.
There were like 4 in a row,
another.
Too, Sap. I mean, it killed 20 minutes of actual time.
I ate my entire dinner in overtime. I am a fast eater. I am a fast eater, but I eat a lot of food. That was pretty easy to polish off. I got dessert in, too, by the time we got through with overtime. It just took the fun out of the game. Now, obviously, you as a Celtics fan, the fun was taken out already, but just me as a impartial
it's a national TV
viewer,
game, Sep. It's a national TV game. These are the games that you have more eyeballs on.
With brilliant young stars and Tatum and Brown and Zion and Brandon Ingram. Fun game. If you're a Celtic fan, you're pissed.
How many times has this happened in the playoffs last year, too? Oh, it's brutal.
Great idea, Jet. 45-second time limit, and then get it out of the hands of the officials who have to come over, undo the headsets, put them in. It's like baseball when they come over and bring them the big, it looks like a giant phone that they get on to see what they, looking at to see if the guy was safe or out. It seems like hockey does the best job of this. And they get a little bit too picayune with, was the skate off the ice. That's a little bit too much. But
I think
least they get
time limit would solve that sort of thing, though.
Much, absolutely.
Again,
yeah.
They don't get the call. Listen, NBA officials, it's a hard sport to officiate.
Oh,
You're never going to be 100% accurate. But again, if you can't see something pretty definitive and obvious, like some of those goaltending calls are obvious, like Robert Williams had one that they called offensive and it clearly wasn't. And that should take you 20 seconds. I'm sorry.
Pretty simple.
That should be very quick. So, that's a complaint, and I think it's a very fair complaint from a lot of people who are just casual NBA fans saying, man, this sucks. I don't want to watch the referees standing around with their Beats by Dre headphones for 5 minutes.
No, I know. It's crazy.
Flipping a computer monitor around and talking amongst themselves.
The NBA has always had this issue from non-fans or just casual fans that you don't have to watch the first 45 minutes, just tune in for the last 3 minutes. But in the case of the game between the Celtics and the Pelicans, the last 3 minutes and then the 5 minutes in overtime took about an hour. So if someone just tuned in for that, they go, what the hell is this?
Boring.
Yeah, so what was the first 45 minutes for? So, time limit and, get up the challenges out of the way because the coaches don't even know what they're challenging, what the hell's going on with that.
The refs don't seem to know how to deal with it.
Know.
Sometimes they call a jump ball if they get it right. The coach, they don't. It's like playing it by the seat of their pants. They don't even know the rules.
No. I guess
a challenge is a bad idea. It continues to be bad. It slows down the game. I'm glad you brought it up in our pre-show meeting, Seth, because that was a great example of the Celtics Pelicans game of how it is the absolute worst way to deal with replays. So before we finish the show, Sap, we're going to do one of our typical segments. We're going to rotate these around, but I think this is a fun one because it's changed actually more than I thought it was going to, and that's the MVP race. So top 5. Sap, do you want to kick us off or you want me to do it?
I'll do it. We'll
Okay,
do it in
go for it.
descending order. Number 5 is Nikola Jokic, who I had higher the last time we did this exercise. He's still playing at a very high level, but his team is barely above 500. I think that kind of factors into it. Number 4 is James Harden. Now, he's been the most durable of the Nets. As I said earlier, Durant's missed 13 games. Kyrie's missed 10. Harden came in the middle of January after starting the season with Houston. He's leading the league in assists. He's averaging 25 a game. He's been very efficient in averaging 25 a game. He played without Durant and Kyrie Irving against Phoenix. The Nets were down 24. He brought them back in that game. I have him at number 4. He's surprised me. He's been the one who's adjusted more than the other 2 players, and he's making it work with the Brooklyn Nets. Number 3 is LeBron James. His play has slipped a little bit in February. He's hitting about 25% from 3, which isn't good enough.
It's
LeBron
ugly.
always had
No.
it really is bad. And LeBron's a player who there's usually about 1 month out of the year where he kind of like reassesses and sees what the team needs to do. Even without Anthony Davis, he's not going to force the action and say, I got to go out and score 40 points. He's playing the long game. He wants to make sure that players like Kuzma or KCP or any other player on the team is playing with more confidence. So I think his numbers may come back a little bit because he's thinking long-term rather than short-term. Number 2 is Damian Lillard, who's just having a spectacular year, seems to hit a game-winning shot once a week for the Portland Trailblazers, playing an incredibly high level. He's not going to be an all-star starter. We talked about that last week. It's pretty stacked backcourt in the Western Conference with Steph Curry and with Luka Doncic, also his backcourt members on that all-star team, and they're going to be starting. But Lillard's been spectacular this year. Number 1 is Joel Embiid. I know he's missed a handful of games, and they have to have load management with him. He's just such a big guy who's never been real durable. Looks like he's taking care of himself more so than he has at any
Just
time.
put up a career high this past week.
Yeah, he's
points.
unstoppable. He's 7'2", Jet. He just dwarfs everybody on the court, and yet
Shaq
he's so
has
skilled.
said he's better than me, like in terms of skill set. Shaq said
He is.
He's got more skill than me.
I mean, he can face up and hit 3-pointers. He can
And
put the ball on
Shaq's
the
not
floor.
one to compliment the younger players.
No, not at all. I mean, he's.
But I was surprised. He said he's got way more skill than I had. Period.
He's got a Olajuwon type skill, right? I mean, just the athletic ability, the footwork, the ability to score with your back to the basket or to face up. He's number 1 right now. The Sixers are battling the Nets for the best record in the Eastern Conference. So I have him at number 1. We're going to do MVP updates every 3rd show. So, a week and a half from now, this could change. But as of right now, number 5, I've got Jokic. Number 4, I went with Harden. Number 3, LeBron James. Number 2, Damian Lillard. And number 1 is Joel Embiid.
Sap, I'm really glad because a lot of times we agree and it's not as fun. And we have very different lists.
Okay.
I'll just get it out of the way and saying I agree with you at the top. I have Embiid, but I've had him all season long, so that shouldn't surprise anybody. If you've been listening to the show since the first time we did it, he was at the top of my ladder. So he remains there.
Right.
He just put up a career high. He's had his best season of his career and just had a career high game. I mean, for a big guy to get 50 in today's NBA, that doesn't happen very often. I mean, he's been unstoppable, absolutely unstoppable. But filling out the rest of it, so I'll go from 5 up since you already know Embiid. I have Donovan Mitchell as my number 5. They have the best record in the NBA. I feel like I had to put a representative. He's their best player in my mind. Rudy Gobert is excellent, but Donovan Mitchell's the straw that stirs the drink. He's a dynamic playmaker. I've said this before. He reminds me a lot of Dwayne Wade. The athleticism, the killer instinct. He wants to take the big shot. He's a little bit smaller than Dwayne Wade, but plays a very similar type of game. He's got all the shots that you could want, and he wants the ball in his hands when the game is on the line. So I think you typically, when you have a team that has the best record in the NBA, they have an MVP candidate. I think he's a worthy MVP candidate, again, going to the stacked backcourt, as you mentioned, in the Western Conference, Sap. Then at 4, I have Damian Lillard for all the reasons you mentioned. He maybe should even be higher because CJ McCollum's been out for a while. Nurkic's been out for a while. They've dealt with a lot of injuries, and they're still right in the thick of the middle of the pack there in the West in terms of the playoff teams. He's kept them afloat. He hits huge shots on a weekly basis. He is probably might finish his career as the best player to not win an MVP award. I don't think he's going to win it this year. But in terms of a guy who is so valuable to his team, I'm saying like they are junk without him. I mean, he is
Absolutely.
so valuable, and I think underappreciated because he plays for a smaller market team. He's that good. So I have Damian Lillard there at 4. At 3, I have Kawhi Leonard, who's played more games than I thought he was going to play this year. And when Kawhi Leonard plays games, he's a top 5 player in the league. He's the best one-on-one defender in the NBA in my mind. That hasn't changed at all. He is an absolute mid-range sniper. I mean, does not miss from mid-range. He is an absolute dominant force when you're talking about somebody who can score from all over the basketball court. For somebody with big hands that sometimes screws up shooting, doesn't mess with him at all. He is an assassin, and he plays both ways, and the Clippers are damn good. So I have Kawhi Leonard there, and then I have LeBron at 2. He's slipping, though, Sap, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him slip further with Anthony Davis. This is the make or break time for his MVP candidacy. The 4 weeks or so that Anthony Davis is out, if the Lakers play really well, which they haven't so far, but plenty of time to right the ship, then he'll probably ice his MVP candidacy and win it. If they play poorly, he'll lose his MVP candidacy. So this is where it's going to matter. If he wants to win that, 5th MVP, 4th?
5th MVP, yep. Same as Jordan at that point.
Okay, if he wants to win his 5th MVP, he's the Lakers, not just LeBron. The Lakers have to play well during this stretch. They have to do better than they have been in the small game sample size without Anthony Davis. They have to maintain. They can't slip far in the standings because that's going to be directly pointed at LeBron and saying he needs Anthony Davis to make this Lakers team hum. And so the MVP race for LeBron James, not necessarily the rest of the guys, but is going to be determined over these next 4 or 5 weeks, in my opinion.
Yeah, if they play 14 games, the next 14 games without Anthony Davis, and he's able to go 10-4, and they stay right at that 2-3 slot in the Western Conference, then his chances are much better. If they go 7-7 or 6-8 over a 14-game stretch,
at 500 or below, that's going to hurt. That's going to crush
and
it for him.
They could fall to 5th in the West, right? Because Phoenix and Portland are playing at a very high level. I mean, the West is stacked.
Sap, if they go 7-7 or worse, even if when Anthony Davis comes back, LeBron plays phenomenal and they end up as the top seed in the West or the 2nd seed, people will point to that stretch without Anthony Davis and they won't give him the MVP, which I think is fair. I think it's fair.
Sure, absolutely. I think
because this is a competitive year for the award. It's very. People were talking like it's LeBron by a landslide. It's tightened up quite a bit because of how well the Sixers and Nets are playing, and I think all those Nets guys ultimately are going to cancel each other out because it's just,
probably, especially since Durant and
the
Kyrie
Jazz
are
playing so well. Lillard's playing. I mean, it's a competitive year. I know Bill Simmons has done this thing where he's weighed MVP trophies and saying, it wasn't that difficult of a year. They just gave it to this guy because not super competitive. This is a true MVP. If you win it this season, you deserve it. I mean, it is a top. I mean, look at the guys. I left out the guys that were hard exclusions for me. Harden, Durant, Irving, Curry, Jokic, all off my list for top 5. I mean, all those guys in a average year could all be at the top of a list based off of their seasons they've had.
And a guy who maybe the numbers don't look MVP worthy, but I always kind of put him into the discussion because he does make players around him better, is Chris Paul. See that with Phoenix. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton are playing at a high level, but Chris Paul's been the guy that is really.
And look at the team hasn't been good, but the numbers for Jokic are not Jokic, phenomenal. for Doncic are good enough to win MVP.
Doncic great too.
Even Giannis's numbers are virtually identical to his MVP seasons.
Update the MVP. I think the MVP might be more fluid than, say, the top 5 power rankings because we kind of get an idea now that it's, Nets, Philly, Lakers, Clippers, Jazz. Those look like the 5 best teams, and maybe Portland and Phoenix kind of dips in and out every now and then.
Yeah, I think that's the MVP race right now is very deep, and I think that top will fluctuate a lot. And people who are saying, like I just mentioned, LeBron in a landslide, I haven't heard that in a few weeks now. It's because he's not struggling. I mean, for a normal human being, his numbers are incredible. But for him, like you said, from 3, the free throw shooting is poor. The team's not playing tremendous without Anthony Davis. And again, the Lakers have dealt with, injuries too. Like Schroeder's been hurt. And so it's not just like just Anthony Davis that's out. But It's not like there's a secondary scorer once Anthony Davis is out that
No,
is
there
reliable
is.
for the Lakers. So we're going to talk about the Lakers a lot later in the week, as we're introducing a new segment later in the week, talking about the quest for Banner 18 from the two teams that have 17 titles, the Celtics and the Lakers. So we'll get more into the Lakers because they are the more interesting team right now as the Celtics continue to be disappointing. But I think that the MVP race is really, really awesome this year, and the NBA should be able to market the crap out of it down the stretch.
Unlike the NFL, which was a landslide for one Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, you got 44 out of 50 first place votes. In fact, that's the way the NFL does it.
What
is
do you
weird.
think you
get
traded
one
for
vote.
a Lombardi trophy, Seth?
No, I'm very selfish. I was very happy that Aaron
You
won his
prefer
third
win the MVP.
MVP trophy. Yeah, that was very important because there's only been 6 players in the history of the NFL that have won 3 or more MVPs, and now my guy Aaron is one of them. But yeah, he got 44 out of 50 votes. The NFL does it weird. 50 voters, you pick one player. That's it. No first, second, or third.
Only one position wins the award. So
pretty much, yeah. I mean, unless a running back, even when a running back has 2,000 yards, they're not going to win it. I mean, see, Derrick Henry didn't even get a vote. But this is going to be close this year.
If Embiid wins it, who's the last center to win MVP?
Shaq. I mean, Giannis is a big, but he's
01?
2000, yeah. Because 01 was
20
Iverson.
years.
Yeah, 20 years, over 20 years since the last.
No, Giannis isn't the center. Not a center.
He's a big, but he's
Duncan. I think we talked about this before. Duncan's kind of a power forward. Garnett was a power forward.
Yep, true.
Been a while.
Center is Shaq is the last one.
So it's something that really, I think it's going to be really interesting that we continue to talk about this because I think it's going to be a really, really interesting race. And those guys that I let off the list, Curry, the 3 guys from the Nets, any one of them could suddenly vault themselves higher.
Yeah.
Donovan,
absolutely.
And if the Jazz go at this pace, it's going to be hard to deny Donovan Mitchell. I mean, look at their record; it's incredible. So, a lot of great NBA stuff to talk about, and we'll talk about more later in the week. Sap, anything going on in between now and the next podcast that you are looking forward to? Are you looking forward to some really exciting non-NBA thing, or are you just glued to the TV?
Yeah, I watch a lot of NBA, follow politics, obviously. I got to get into some TV shows. Man, I'm in a slump with that stuff, Jet. So I got to get, into more of the shows that everybody talks about all the time. I watch a lot of old stuff because I'm officially 80 years old at this point, not 57. But I got to get into some of the hip new shows that are on Netflix, et cetera, get a little bit more into that. I got to get back into movies. No one's going to the movie theater anymore.
Theaters are going to reopen soon, Sep. I saw that New York's reopening them partial attendance. So, although, no movies are actually playing in the theaters, but you can go.
I'll go to the theater. I'll get popcorn, licorice, soda.
I do. I miss going to the movie theater. I miss going to basketball games, too. I'm so excited for
all of that stuff.
You can go back to the Garden. I can't wait. I mean, I'm going to go back and boo, but I'm going to go back.
Oh, yeah. You'll be the guy that gets taken out.
Oh, when they announced Brad Stevens in the starting, the head coach of the Boston Celtics is Brad Stevens. Boo! It's going to be deafening. I'm going to lead the charge. Me and the 500 other fans in attendance.
Right. You're going to be like the woman in Atlanta that got asked to leave the stadium. Yeah.
Oh, they'll have to find me and kick me out. But I will be booing.
They'll find you.
I will be booing like I booed Rick Pitino when he was the coach here. But that's just me, Sap. All right, I will. We will chat later in the week. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our show. We are, as always, the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. I'm Jet. He is Sap. We are presented by our dear friends at Full Press Coverage. You can find our podcast on their website, on Spotify, on Twitter. They're up on YouTube, SoundCloud. They're everywhere. So go check it out. If you like it, tweet at me or Sap. I'm at Jet Stryer. Sap, you're at John Sap 25. I finally remembered it. JOHN.
Yep.
Tweet at us if you have ideas or things you want us to talk about. We are always open and all ears or eyeballs on Twitter, I guess. So we are out of here, Sap. Thank you for another great show. Again, Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage.